The Riverside Classical Dance Academy stood like a palace of porcelain perfection, shiny, elite, and rigid in its grace. But that grace didn't extend to everyone. When 12-year-old Luna Alvarez first stepped into the grand hall, her heart thudded against her chest like a trapped bird. She didn't have the pedigree or the polished shoes. What she had was rhythm, soul, and a hunger to dance that wouldn't die. "Hey Luna, want to dance with us?" came a voice, too sweet to be sincere. Sophia, the golden-haired star of the academy, twirled around with calculated elegance. Her invitation echoed through the marble floors and bounced off the mirrored walls. The girls surrounding her giggled, not kindly. It wasn't an invitation. It was a dare. A trap. Luna hesitated, her sneakers sticking slightly to the polished floor. Her clothes were secondhand, her movements raw, but her eyes held something fierce, something untamed. Sophia's smirk deepened. "Oh wait, do you even know what ballet is?" The laughter that followed was sharp and cold, but Luna didn't cry. She didn't lash out either. She turned around, walked back to the side of the room, and watched, quietly, absorbing every beat, every flick of her wrist, every step that others had taken for granted. Her body remembered. Her soul listened. What Sophia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Luna's mother had been a dancer once, long before illness stole her limbs and life in the same year. Luna had grown up with a rhythm in her bones and sorrow in her lungs. Every heartbeat carried a melody, every breath a pulse of choreography only she could feel. In the weeks that followed, Luna became a shadow in the academy. She practiced alone in empty rooms, her reflection flickering in broken mirrors, her movements sharpened by solitude. She watched the other girls, memorizing their steps by day, then adding her own fire to them by night. Still, the cruelty didn't stop. One afternoon, Luna opened her locker to find her only practice tights ripped and soaked in mop water. A note inside read, "Maybe try soccer." It wasn't signed, but the glitter pen made it obvious. She said nothing. She just danced harder. The day of the midterm showcase arrived like a storm. Parents filled the rows, phones ready, and music swelling through the vaulted ceiling. Luna stood at the back, her borrowed costume slightly too tight at the waist, her ballet slippers mismatched, one slightly torn at the toe. But none of that mattered. She had practiced every night beneath a flickering bulb in the community center. She had danced on cold concrete floors while the janitor swept up around her. Sophia opened the show, her entrance grand and perfectly timed. Applause rang out before her foot even touched the floor. She moved like glass, graceful but fragile, controlled. As she bowed, her eyes locked with Luna's, and a smirk formed. Luna's turn came near the end. She stepped onto the stage to an awkward silence. The music began, an unfamiliar, unconventional rhythm she had chosen herself. Not Tchaikovsky, not Bach. A blend of classical strings and Latin percussion, bold and risky. The first movements were simple, deliberate, precise. But then came the fire. Luna moved like a wave, and a storm combined. Every spin, every leap carried weight, emotion, memory. A quiet defiance screamed through every gesture. The crowd leaned forward. This wasn't just a dance. This was a declaration. I belong here, whether you like it or not. The final note rang out. The room was silent. And then came the applause, slow at first, then thunderous. Luna stood frozen, heart pounding, chest rising, and falling like she'd just come through a war. Sophia clapped too, but her face was stone. After the performance, people whispered. A few parents approached her. A judge from a regional dance competition even asked for her name. But the next day, the locker incident escalated. Luna's backpack was found in the trash, ripped, her notebook drenched in juice. A flyer for the regional qualifiers lay at her feet, torn in half. Still, Luna said nothing, just danced harder. One afternoon, she stayed late to rehearse alone, and someone locked her inside the studio. The lights turned off, her phone battery dead. Hours passed. She practiced under moonlight streaming through the skylight until a janitor found her, shivering, blistered, and bruised. When the administration asked who did it, she refused to name names. She knew how it worked. She was the outsider. She wouldn't win that game. But someone had noticed. That someone was Mr. Reynolds, the Academy's oldest instructor. He rarely spoke unless it was about form, posture, or musicality. But that night, after finding Luna curled up in the hallway with her swollen ankle and no ride home, he sat beside her and said nothing for a long time. Then finally, he asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Luna looked at the floor. "They'll just say I'm being dramatic, or that I don't belong here anyway." Mr. Reynolds tilted his head slightly. "Talent doesn't ask permission, Luna, and it doesn't need a last name to prove itself." From that day forward, something shifted at MR. Reynolds began inviting Luna to private morning sessions before anyone else arrived. He gave her access to the historical archives of choreography, introduced her to forgotten masters, and taught her not just how to dance, but how to speak with her body. Under his guidance, Luna's movements became poetry, and word began to spread. Still, the sabotage didn't stop. The closer the regional qualifiers drew near, the crueler Sophia became. One day, she accidentally spilled hot coffee on Luna's leotard. Another day, she orchestrated a routine that excluded Luna at the last minute, leaving her standing confused mid-stage as the other girls danced without her. But every time, Luna came back stronger. She began to choreograph her own pieces at home, blending ballet with the salsa rhythms her abuela once played on old cassettes. She found her mother's worn dance journal buried in a storage box, filled with pencil sketches, stage dreams, and one note that broke Luna's heart. "My daughter will dance in places I never could." That line became her fuel. On the eve of the regional audition, Luna sat alone in the empty studio, rehearsing a solo she had created from scratch. Mr. Reynolds watched quietly from the doorway, pride in his eyes, but worry too. "You know they'll try to break you tomorrow, don't you?" he said. "I know," Luna replied, staring at her reflection. "But I'm not dancing for them anymore." "Then who?" he asked softly. She turned to him, voice trembling but fierce. "For the girl in the mirror, the one who never gave up." The day of the regional competition arrived with nerves sharpened like blades. The Riverside team filed into the grand auditorium, polished, rehearsed, glittering under the golden lights. Sophia led the girls in a group warm-up, her voice sugary sweet as instructors watched nearby. But Luna stayed apart, stretching alone, wrapped in focus. Her solo was scheduled near the end. She'd watched competitors perform flawless pirouettes and dazzling jetés. She'd also seen a few stumble, caught in the pressure. Sophia's group number was performed just before Luna's, an elaborate piece full of intricate lifts and synchronized turns. The crowd clapped dutifully, but the response lacked soul. Sophia took her final bow, glanced toward Luna with the sharpness of a blade, then disappeared backstage. Luna stood in the wings as her name echoed through the loudspeaker. She walked out into the spotlight, heart a war drum in her chest, her worn shoes whispering across the stage. The music began, her music, a blend of cello and flamenco, strings and heel taps. Something old, something new. She began slow, controlled, a single arm rising, a toe touching the earth like it was sacred. Then came the build. Her body exploded into motion, drawing on every morning rehearsal, every insult, every blister. She spun like she was tearing through a storm, leapt like gravity owed her an apology, paused just long enough to look at the crowd, like she saw them and dared them to look back. By the final movement, you could hear breathing in the room, nothing else. And then the finish, her signature move, a grounded drop to one knee, one arm overhead, eyes closed in defiance and grace. The silence that followed lasted too long. Then applause broke, wild, stunned, rising like a wave. Some stood. Judges looked at each other, exchanging hushed words. Sophia, standing in the wings, had not clapped. Backstage, no one approached Luna at first, until one of the younger dancers, a girl from another school, touched her arm and whispered, "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Luna nodded quietly. "Thank you." The results came in later that evening. Sophia's team placed third. Luna placed first in the solo division and earned a scholarship to the National Academy's Summer Intensive. The announcement caused a stir. Whispers, disbelief, a few jealous glares. Sophia cornered her outside near the fountain, fury barely veiled. You stole that from me. Luna stared at her, exhausted and calm. No, I earned it. You just never thought I could. You don't belong here, Sophia hissed. Luna's smile was soft, almost sad. Then stopped looking so scared. The scholarship letter arrived on a Thursday. The envelope was thick, the seal golden. Luna stood in the kitchen, staring at her name printed in elegant type. Her abuela, wiping flour from her hands, stood behind her with eyes brimming. You're going, she whispered, no question in her tone. I don't know how we'll afford the rest, Luna said quietly, even as her fingers trembled over the page. Travel, clothes, food. Her abuela chuckled, pulled open the junk drawer, and retrieved an old coffee tin. Inside were bundles of worn bills, 5s, 10s, 20s, some faded so badly you could barely see the ink. I've been saving since you learned to walk on your toes, she said. Mija, I knew. Your mama knew. Luna cried then, full-bodied and loud, for the first time in months. The summer intensive was another world. Dancers from Paris, London, Seoul. They arrived with designer duffels and years of elite training. Luna arrived with a suitcase repaired with duct tape, and the fire of someone who had survived judgment before. At first, the teachers watched her warily, unsure where she'd fit, but her movements spoke a different language, one of struggle, honesty, and soul. Soon, the instructors began rearranging their own choreography to suit her. One even pulled her aside and said, You don't dance like them. You dance like you've been waiting to tell the world something important. And she had. Months later, back at Riverside, Luna walked into the old academy, wearing her National Academy jacket. She was taller somehow, not in height, but in presence. Sophia sat near the front, watching her with an unreadable expression. The room stilled. I'm not here to gloat, Luna began, voice even. I'm here because I want to help. A few students exchanged confused glances. I'm starting a weekend class, she continued. For anyone who can't afford lessons. Kids who dance on pavement, not polished floors. If you want to learn, come. If you don't, that's okay too. Sophia scoffed. And now you're a saint. Luna looked at her, really looked. No, just someone who remembers what it's like to be on the outside. The weekend class grew quickly. First 5 students, then 15. Luna volunteered every hour she could, sometimes teaching barefoot when kids arrived without shoes. She brought music, stories, and snacks. She brought love into a space that had once tried to push her out. One day, as class ended, a small girl with crooked braids tugged at her sleeve. Miss Luna, were you ever scared? Luna knelt, smiled gently. Every day. But I danced anyway. The studio grew quiet as dusk settled in. Alone, Luna stood in front of the mirror again, the same one from years ago, where she once questioned her place. She danced. Not for the judges, not for the scholarship, but for the girl who once stood barefoot in that same spot, ignored, overlooked, and underestimated. She danced for her mother's memory, for her abuela's sacrifice, for every child who had ever felt invisible. And this time, when she finished, she didn't need applause. She had finally heard her own.